In 1971, the court ruled that the city government could choose to not operate their desegregated facilities if the decision appeared neutral at face value and they were spreading, quote, equal damage on each person in the area. However, in reality, the damage was not equal. The city closed all of the public pools that were affordable to lower-income residents whom were largely composed of Black Americans. So instead of allowing Black and white people to swim in the same pool, white people who were terminally sexually insecure and afraid of Black people were just like, okay, well, we're just not gonna have pools anymore for the public. You know, if you don't have the money to own your own pool, you're not allowed to swim anymore. But that was the sacrifice they were willing to make in the name of their insecurity and hate. And that's one of the main reasons why you don't see a lot of public pools anymore. Hello. If you're wondering why I'm a frog, that's what happens when I get sick. I've been under the weather. I got like something like the flu. I don't think it's COVID. I got some bullshit. Okay, and then it left me with a post-viral cough, we're assuming. I got chucked out by a doctor, all that kind of shit. And those can linger for a while, and because my job entails me speaking, and then me speaking exacerbates the cough, I am being silenced by the liberal media who have tactically given me this illness so that I cannot stream like I normally would. And that's why I'm not on camera right now, just because I don't want to get, ready for it. But I still want to put something out because I don't have much. So I wanted to bring this up. I saw this on Twitter, and a bunch of people are talking about it. This is from WBAL News Radio, which is a Maryland radio station. There's a video here, and a lot of people have takes on it. Obviously, all the people I follow have good takes on it, about how the fact that we are filming these kids and shaming them, or at least that's the vibe that's kind of given, like, ooh, these kids broke the law, and they just wanted to go swimming. And mind you, I don't know that pools are normally supposed to be this color, so clearly this pool is not being maintained well enough, unless if something has changed in the time that I've been in a public pool or not, which has admittedly been a while. But anyway, it doesn't look like it's supposed to be that kind of green. I don't know if there's plankton in there. I don't know, SpongeBob's in there. I don't know what's going on. For some reason, there are people here who are getting mad at the kids. And there's a lot of directions you can take this kind of concept, but there was one in particular that I wanted to talk about. And that was the fact that you don't really see a whole lot of public pools anymore. There was a long point of time back in the day where public pools were a relatively regular thing. Bathhouses as well, though not as much as public pools, obviously, but just places where people got together, swam in the same water, got some exercise, got some leisure. It was very family-oriented as well. A night out, or rather a day out, taking a swim, having a dip, throwing a ball around or whatever, just having fun swimming because humans like to do that, right? And there actually aren't that many around, like at least not compared to how popular they were in the past. And it does make you wonder why. Like, why is it? Why would it be that public pools, swimming, which a lot of people really enjoy. Now, of course, I got a lot of trans people in my community, and, the idea of going out and swimming in public to a lot of trans people is very dysphoria-inducing. So perhaps this is not the best community to talk about this to. But nevertheless, people enjoy swimming, even those who do have said concerns, and I wish they wouldn't have to worry about said things. I actually first heard about this from watching a Beau the Fifth Column video. Unfortunately, Beau's videos are titled and thumbnailed so vaguely as to be very easily clicked on by your boomer uncle, and hopefully given a left-wing perspective on whatever issue he's talking about, which is a really good tactic and I support, but unfortunately makes it hard for me to look up any of the videos unless I specifically remember the name of them. So I can't, unfortunately, link it for you. Maybe somebody else can find it. But I first found out about that there, and I wanted to just talk about it because we're looking at a bunch of kids here. Obviously, there's like a huge racial bent to this because Twitter is infested by people who, are scared of Black people and are afraid that the men are going to go take their white wives or whatever. Anyway, it's some weird shit. I don't know what's up with the insecurity of a bunch of blue check marks on Twitter and stuff like that. There's a lot of crazy shit going on this platform. So obviously there's that racial element as well. And shockingly, or not shockingly, if you understand the history of this country, which, conservatives and Republicans have been trying to rewrite since they have made so many atrocities, it's not very surprising. Turns out, a lot of this had to do with racism. What? No way. The idea that there are so many fewer public pools for anybody to swim in, not to mention, like, any kind of racial dynamic, but literally anybody to swim in. If you ever wanted to go for a swim, and you're especially not by an ocean, which a lot of people aren't, like it's a lot harder to find one nowadays. And frankly, I think swimming is base. It's one of the best exercises out there to swim. It engages a bunch of muscles at once, and also a bunch that you may not normally be engaging. It's very good, and also it's fun. Unfortunately, I've got chronic sinus issues, and the water hurts my nose, so I gotta wear a nose plug, and it looks very silly. But what can you do? So I have this Wikipedia article. There are a bunch of different articles on news websites and whatnot that have written about it, but I just wanted to read the Wikipedia because it's a synopsis, it's a summation of a bunch of those different things that I could possibly cite. Diversity in swimming. The racial composition of swimming and other aquatic sports has long been influenced by the history of segregation and violence at pools, as well as the building patterns of public and private pools in America. When swimming first became popular in America, pools were segregated by gender and class, not race. At the end of the 19th century and early 20th century, municipal pools were built in the North mainly for poor urban working-class Americans and used as bathing sites. Large groups of working-class men and women flocked into their gender-assigned public pools and rid themselves of the dirt and grime acquired over the course of their day, while wealthier middle and upper-class citizens used their own private baths to clean. This picture changed as a result of the redefinition of the germ theory of disease in the late 1890s. This change concluded that disease was not linked to dirtiness, but rather linked to small microbes transferred by physical contact between people and the touching of shared objects or spaces. A lot of people, unfortunately, in the modern day, who would be the people who are mad about the integration of public pools and whatnot, also seem to have their qualms with the germ theory of disease and also vaccines, which is kind of funny and also kind of depressing. Pools as the bathing site for many working-class Americans were now recognized as a public health danger, so cities built bathhouse facilities instead of pools. After this revelation of the germ theory of disease, the influence and popularity of pools was not completely diminished, but rather transformed. Pools became an arena for exercise, leisure, and sport, not cleanliness. In West Chicago Park, the Chicago Douglas Park pool was built for the purpose of sport, with a longer length suited for race competition, areas for spectators, and springboards. Initially, the facilities brought together a diverse group of pool goers with people of all races from nearby middle and lower class neighborhoods attending. However, soon the park board began charging an entry fee to cut down on the cost of the park, but also rid it of the boisterous lower class boys that always seemed to cause problems. It was entry fees and intentionally choosing wealthier areas to be the host of pools that sidelined many lower class Americans, both black and white, from using the nice public pools. Which is interesting, both black and white. So obviously we're talking about a very racialized element of why these pools don't really exist, but it's also class-based, as you can very clearly tell. Obviously, the reason why pools would be a place for, cleaning yourself, kind of like a bathhouse, is because if you don't have a, like, for one instance, if you're homeless and you don't have a pot to piss in that you can call your own, well, then you're going to try to find a way to clean yourself in any way that you can, right? And going to a pool, while it's not ideal, oftentimes a lot of pools will have public showers that you can use after using the pool because of the chlorine and whatnot. You want to wash that off yourself, all this kind of thing. Or literally just getting in the pool, while it's not the best alternative to an actual shower, does allow you to kind of clean yourself, rid yourself of dirt and all this kind of stuff. And it's very helpful for that purpose. So once entry fees are bought in to try to pay for the costs of maintaining the parks and the pools that are usually attached to them, that obviously is going to make it harder for everyone who doesn't have money to use those pools. And that includes white people. This is a scary thought that a lot of white people in America that happen to vote for the Republican Party seem to want to forget, but white people can be poor too. They're not all the gilded aristocracy of the magnificent white race. And oh my god, we're all, like, motherfuckers are subject to capitalism everywhere, okay? Wherever it exists. And if you are white, you are going to be oppressed not on the basis of your skin color, but on the basis of class in America. This has been a thing since the dawn of time. People of greater means, of more control over the monopoly of violence like the police, and versions of it throughout history have always been able to try to find ways to oppress those beneath them, that they see as beneath them, which they can usually quantify in a variety of ways by racial prejudices about like lifestyle or whatever, religion, and also the amount of money somebody has, and the socioeconomic class position that puts them in. So these entry fees being added is a dual purpose for a lot of the like middle class and wealthier white people out there, in that it keeps out black people, which is the major benefit for a lot of racists, but also keeps out the proletarians, the dirty masses, the lower class white people even that you don't really want to be around because you're really fucking weird, and I'm not exactly sure how these ideas seep into your head outside of propaganda, because none of this shit is fucking natural. Anyway, from the 1890s to the 1920s, many pools were gender segregated due to the visual and physical intimacy created by the pool deck atmosphere. Swimming suits for both men and women involved minimal clothing and coverage, thus making the pool deck area visually intimate. In addition, the social and interactive aspects of swimming also made way for more physical contact, both intentional and accidental, between fellow swimmers. The issue of men and women swimming together eventually became the grounds by which many pools were segregated, because people are fucking weird, bro. So, you might remember, like, this idea for people in my generation, millennials or whatever. I was born in 95, I'm basically dead at this point, but you might remember the idea of a man wearing a Speedo, which is a very minimal coverage undergarment to keep the jewels together and not be naked publicly. Those articles of clothing are laughed at by a lot of people, and I don't know exactly why they are. For one, they're better for aerodynamics, as far as I understand physics, when you're swimming, if you're trying to go fast, be competitive, whatever. But also, this is just like a general trend in fashion that seems to have cropped up. If you look back at like the 80s, 70s, 60s, men were wearing crop tops, they were wearing shorts, they were being fucking sluts out there. And for some reason, after a certain point in time, like, having your knees exposed wearing shorts became like a faux pas and too fruity or whatever because of the homophobia and blah, blah, blah in men in this society. And it's very strange. I don't understand why that is, but obviously because of that, and because of the fact that the women are going to be more scantily clad as well, it does produce an environment that is more, visually stimulating for people trying to look at people they find attractive and blah, 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 blah. But a lot of any supposed problems that can be made from that, you can solve through social means, not by segregating pools and banning people from certain pools, right? I don't think that's the solution there. Because contrary to popular belief, people like to swim together, right? If you've got a girly friend or a boyfriend or a non-binary individual with whom you find to be nice, going to go for a swim with them is very fun. It's a fun activity. You get to exercise. Families will go to pools and whatnot. And oftentimes there will be people of a variety of genders involved in those families. So the idea of the solution here to any problems that might occur with, co-ed swimming not being social ones, but rather literally banning people from being able to use certain pools is like the most two-head, small-brained solution you could possibly think of, and literally only increases the probability of more problems in the future. It's very dumb, and that's just gender segregation. So we went from gender segregation to racial segregation. In the 1920s, during the first pool building boom in the United States, pools began to be gender integrated in an attempt to promote family, community, and the pool as a prominent area for socialization. As gender integration was implemented, racial segregation was simultaneously adopted due to the physical and visual intimacy of swimming attire and pool decks. Uh-oh. What's going on here? Wait, hold on a second. If visual intimacy is a problem that we're citing for why, after gender integration is implemented, why racial segregation would then be implemented, why would the fact that you could see people in swimwear, which is usually not as much as like a full suit or dress because it's difficult to swim in such articles of clothing, and also you're out in the sun, usually you're trying to get a nice tan, you're trying to soak up the vitamin D, the pool, electrolytes, the sun, it's what plants crave, Why is it that the idea of there being women at these pools that are a bit more scantily clad because of the fact that you have to wear certain swimwear to be able to effectively swim, why would that then spawn racial segregation? This doesn't make any sense. What's up with that? Well, so a pool's physical intimacy, stemming from the sharing of the same water, made way for racist assumptions determining that black Americans were dirtier and thus had more diseases than white people, or that white people could contract from swimming together. This is very stupid, by the way, obviously. Also, because of the minimal coverage of swimsuits and close proximity of pool goers, the racist belief that black men were, quote, sexually aggressive led to racial segregation of pools because white men, the bastion of the human race, the strong men that lead to good times, right, didn't want black men and white women to interact. Why would that be? That's really weird. So for one, they're not sexually aggressive or more than white people, okay? People are doing assault and shit out there, and it's some fucked up bullshit. But there has never been anything to support that this conspiracy theory is correct in any way. This is a fear that they have. It's an insecurity that these white men at that time have and still pervades our society to this day. And it's funny and it's also depressing, okay? It's incredibly funny to me as a person who does not give a fuck about what your skin color is when it comes to any of this crazy ass bullshit that we're reading about. Maybe I'm out of touch with the racists. I don't really get it, okay? But, it goes on. The white community feared that integrated pools would allow black men to, quote, visually consume, to look at them, touch, assault, and rape white women. The threat of sexual violence on white women was the grounds by which pools were segregated. The protection of women. We strong white men, in this case, need to protect the women, and that's why we need to segregate pools. That's why we need to ban an entire race of people from swimming. And the reason cited, I don't think it's the cleanliness one. I don't think that's the major one. I think that's like an addendum, an asterisk that was added. I think the major one is because for conservative, bigoted white people in this society, especially white men, sexual insecurity is a massive driving force for a variety of the bigoted things that they do. In this case, the banning of black people from public pools because you're afraid that a black man is going to emasculate you and your white wife is going to run away with him because he's just clearly so much more attractive and probably better at sex as well. Like, the idea that this is a thing that people believe is absurd to me. Also, the idea that, like, all black people have bigger penises or whatever, which, to my knowledge, I don't think is actually true. It's just a big stereotype. And it can be negatively impactful to a variety of black men that don't enjoy, the supposed benefits of their race that would give to their manhood, as it were. So, like, so much of this, and that's just the segregation of pools. Not to mention the segregation of black people from any public spaces that women might be present. Not to mention a variety of things we're seeing when it comes to the anti-trans panic of the modern day. Because, like, why are men so afraid of there being people who are assigned male at birth that happen to find out that they're actually trans women and then transition and then look very feminine and pretty and hot? And some would say hotter than the average cis woman. Like, why would that be a threat to these people? It should be, like, more the merrier. Like, oh, shit, I'm a cisgender heterosexual man, and I'm out here trying to lay pipe. We got an entire fucking factory producing them when it comes to, more and more women or feminine people being enfranchised into that possible dating pool. How is this a problem? Well, it's because they're insecure, because they're worrying that they might end up, like, finding a person who has a penis attractive or was viewed in society as a man for a while but now isn't attractive. It's very strange, but it's sexual insecurity. And a lot of this is a major driving force for conservatism in America and probably around the world. Anyway, continuing on, the Great Migration. This is a thing that you might have learned in school, hopefully. Changed the matter of cleanliness in pools from a class issue from the 1890s to the 1910s to a race issue from the 1920s to the 1930s due to the development of city slums of black Americas. The Great Migration was the movement of millions of black Americans from the rural South to Northwest and Midwest cities from the mid-1910s to the 1930s. A key impact of the Great Migration is the development of redlining and race-restrictive housing covenants in the North to concentrate black Americans in specific neighborhoods. With the ramifications of this, by the way, still linger on. That's not that long ago. 1910s, 1930s, your parents might have been alive at that time. Like, come on. Black communities dealt with restrictive housing covenants and higher rent prices, which left many black Americans with minimal options for housing. As a result, black families were forced to subdivide their apartments and cram in extra tenants to make the inflated monthly rent payments, which left little money or time for regular maintenance of their homes, which is also a really interesting thing because this is a thing that I've seen in my own family. The fact that I'm half Latino, it's like almost a stereotype at this point, like that Oye Primos show, kind of plays on it as well. And it's not like a negative thing by any stretch, because a lot of this, what I'm about to talk about, is like a very American and modern idea. But the idea of having multi-generational households where you'll have people who are 18 and going to college still living with their parents even after college, and you'll have grandparents living with their children, which are then, going to be the fathers of other children and whatnot. And it's like, this is a really cool idea. I don't know why Americans, they look at that and they cringe. For the people who seem to value family and whatnot so much, conservatives are like the first people to be like, oh, you still live at home with your parents? you're a fucking loser. Even though one of their major activatable violent demographics that they often cater to are incels, people who have difficulty attaining romantic and sexual relationships. It's very strange to me that you would ever talk shit on anybody for having a multi-generational household. And it's especially shitty because not only is it like a racial dynamic depending on the demographic of people we're talking about, but it's also a class one, right? Like if rent is way too goddamn high, then you get a bunch of people to help pay for the rent. So if you're in college and you need to get a house and you don't want to live in dorms, you get a bunch of friends together, you share the rent of a house and yada, yada, yada. Or if you're not going to college, if you're just a family trying to make it happen, well, maybe you live with your cousins because the incomes that each of the people who are working there are making helps you pay for the house. This, to me, if it wasn't the product of socioeconomic causes that could be fixed if we actually gave a damn and put forward policy to help people not have to work multiple jobs to make ends meet and insane hours to keep food on the table for their children, like all of these problems could be done away with, but there would probably still be multi-generational houses, and I like the idea that there would be people that are actively choosing to live together in that way, not because of any kind of exterior forces when it comes to their ability to make money and pay for rent, but rather because they enjoy being around their own family. The old saying goes, your parents take care of you when you're young, and then you take care of your parents when they're old. Very simple, very obvious. It's a cool thing. It's very wholesome. It's very family-oriented. And the idea that you would have a problem with people doing this or make fun of people for doing this is very weird, especially for, the family-first side of the fence here. Black neighborhoods quickly became rundown and overcrowded at the hands of this cycle. From a white American's perspective, black migrants replaced the poor white European immigrants that previously inhabited the slums. The noticeably dilapidated working-class neighborhoods were now solely identified as black communities. By the way, those poor white European immigrants, for a while, were not actually considered white. Polish people, Italian people, German people, these were not always people who were considered to be white. That only happened once, white people needed to pump their numbers up, so they enfranchised a bunch of people that they previously looked down upon on the basis of their country of origin, ethnicity, nationality, whatever, skin color, as now being white so that they can deal with the amount of black people that were gaining rights and whatnot. It was kind of a bargain on their part. They would tolerate Italian people, German people, Polish people, and allow them to benefit from white privilege as long as they helped them shit on black people, which, because of a variety of stupid shit going on in their minds, is an important thing to do. I don't know why. But that wasn't always the case. It was the case for a while that it was immigrants from Italy and whatnot that were populating a lot of the so-called slums or lower-class neighborhoods, but, these things change throughout time. The worry of disease transmission in bathhouses and recreational pools is now linked to black Americans. Pools were also unlikely to be built in or near these overcrowded black neighborhoods, and entry and membership fees for other pools would have been unaffordable to black Americans. And this obviously is because there are a variety of systemic factors at play in the country then and now that literally the point of it is to make it so that black people in America have less money. So they have less power in society because money is power in a capitalist system, and also to make it so that their lives are worse because these people are fucking sociopathic, insane people. The people that support these kinds of policies that force black and brown people to have lower generational wealth, transferability, and all this kind of stuff, and upward social mobility. It's intentional on the point of the people who designed the system in that way to keep the so-called undesirables down. So this is just a product of that. This is just one way you could, in a smaller scale, apply that to pools and the fact that you don't want to see black people swimming next to white people because you're weird. The Great Migration shifted the societal view on cleanliness to an issue of the black community and created deteriorated black neighborhoods with little access to aquatic facilities, especially considering if there are a variety of pools in so-called black areas with a lot of black people living there, those pools are going to be disadvantaged economically as well. A lot of these areas, if they are essentially relinquished to black people to live in, they're not going to get the benefits of a state and the services that that state provides in terms of maintaining the pipes and roads and the cleanliness of a variety of the infrastructure, the hardiness of a variety of the infrastructure that people would need because motherfucking racist-ass white people are in political positions of power. And corporations who would seek to marginalize black and brown people as well have a lot of money with which to throw around to a variety of politicians to keep this shit going. So, A lot of pools then in these communities that would remain would end up not having a good enough maintenance, unfortunately, not because of the fact that the black people working there or whatever don't want to clean it, but rather the state is not willing to allocate resources to these public pools, which means they are the domain of the state. That's why they are public, from actually maintaining it. And the reason being, one, they don't want black people to have good pools because it's a way to slight black people personally and make them swim in worse pools or whatever, but also so that less and less of these pools end up getting built in the future in those communities. And it essentially allows for people to, just continue a weird stranglehold on power over another person because of the variety of things going on in their mind that we're hoping to do away with in this society. So at this point, we're going to have two different kinds of segregation. We got de jure segregation. Local governments officially segregated pools in their cities and deployed police officers to enforce these laws. And de facto segregation, for pools that were not legally segregated, white swimmers intimidated and inflicted violence, such as drownings and beatings, on black swimmers to enforce the divisions. So much for the idea that black and brown people are inherently more violent or whatever. And whatever, the white supremacists on TV, like Tucker Carlson, or I guess he's on YouTube now because he got yoinked after Fox News had to pay a healthy settlement to Dominion for lying about the 2020 election, and a variety of other dumbasses online. So much for the idea that those people are so-called inherently more violent than white people, when the entire history of this country shows that to be nearly the exact opposite. It is certainly old hat by this point to be like, oh, every conservative accusation is a confession, and it's kind of just a fact of life. It's a theory in the way that gravity is a theory, that white people get very violent when they're, for whatever reason, mad at literally anything. But in this case, black people swimming in pools, Normal people don't get mad about this, but apparently white people did at the time and still do. Now, of course, we should say, hashtag not all, or not all white people, as we'll see in the future of this page, did. But there were a lot of people who were propagandized to think that way, who had bad experiences in their life that led them to think that way. They were taught to think that way by their parents, because of the propaganda their parents consumed, and also because of the fact that these people can just genuinely be hateful as well. I always try to bring up a variety of things that cause people to think the things that they think, like propaganda and all this kind of stuff, but it is certainly possible that there are just hateful people out there as well. So, and this is not even just unique to the conversation of pools, right? There have been riots and massacres of black and brown people throughout the history of this country. This country was literally founded upon the violence that the settlers wrought against the people who were native to North America, and also the black people that were stolen from Africa and brought to this country to build it for free as slaves. The idea that white people are not seen in society as inherently violent, and somehow that's become, it's black and brown people that is absurd to me. Because white people committing acts of violence has moved politics in many ways. In fact, we've gone over this a million times, the grand majority of domestic terrorism in the United States of America, the greatest domestic terror threat to the US of A, is white supremacist terrorists. Are white men who are so upset about the fact that there are people that don't look like them out there that they are willing to do violence for that political end. The FBI has studied this. We have statistics to back this up. It's absurd to me. Anyway, New Deal in swimming. Following the initial pool boom from 1920 to 1929, public pool construction slowed as the Great Depression began. Not good. Under part of the Franklin D. Roosevelt New Deal, which aimed to resolve massive unemployment by funding in public works projects, from roads and schools to swimming pools. The building and repair and renovation of pools also gave jobs to millions of unemployed Americans under the New Deal agency known as the Civil Works Administration, which later became the Works Progress Administration. In the United States, the WPA workers built 805 new swimming pools and 848 wading pools while repairing or improving 339 existing pools. The pools built and improved were described to be, quote, examples of state-of-the-art engineering with, quote, massive filtration systems, heating units, and even underwater lighting, and also able to adapt to off-season recreational uses like tennis, handball, and volleyball. Pools were built in even the smallest towns and cities, uniting the communities in recreation and companionship, and serving as a reminder of the government's assistance during the crisis of the Great Depression. But a bunch of racists are going to get mad now. pools are having to be desegregated. You know, after Brown versus the Board of Education and schools are now desegregated and Jim Crow laws are getting erased and segregation broadly is being done away with and put in the dustbin of history like it fucking deserves to be, well, now that's going to apply to your pools as well. So if we go back to why pools were race segregated to begin with, the insane idea that, you know, oh, if there are black people swimming with white women, they're gonna steal them all because I'm a white man and I'm racist and I am really sexually insecure about a variety of things. And I am worried that because these black men are apparently, in my mind, so much more attractive and probably capable in the sack, I'm gonna decide that these pools should be segregated, actually, by race. Because that was one of the justifications for doing that, then obviously once pools are being forced to be desegregated, those insecurities, which are always there, are going to, you know, become another factor again. Wow. It's a batshit insane tool that we'll be seeing again later. In the early 1960s, African-American swimmers were still banned from swimming in white-owned pools in places such as Centennial Park Swimming Pool in Nashville, Tennessee, rated recently as one of the worst states to live in by, it might have been NBC or something, who looked at a variety of metrics in terms of how good for business these states are, inclusivity and whatnot, how good it would be for people to live there and move there. Tennessee, it's up there on some of the worst states to live in the modern United States of America, brother. And so are a variety of Republican-run states because Republicans don't know how to govern, they just know how to hate people and give money to wealthy people in the form of tax breaks and deregulation. Although some cities and public pools already had begun the process of desegregation, in 1954, due to Brown versus the Board of Education's decision that declared the separate but equal doctrine unconstitutional, segregation in public sphere became illegal. Thus, the division of public pools on the basis of race also became illegal because the designation of public pools based on race was inherently unequal. Later, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 further made the segregation of public facilities illegal by prohibiting discrimination on the basis of race and color. And I want to just, once again, for the Zoomers in my community, the Civil Rights Act, which you may have heard of before, you probably don't learn enough about it in school, but you've probably heard about it, 1964. Now, I know in current year 2023, that sounds like forever ago, but it's not. It's really not. 1964. Get out your little calculator, okay? I'll do it with you. Are you ready for this? This is going to blow your mind. 2023, current year, minus 1964. Would you look at that? That's only 60 years ago, roughly. 60 years. Motherfuckers that were alive back then for the signing of the Civil Rights Act are still alive today. Modern day America, the United States of 2023. Still alive. If you were born on the signing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the least racist human being to ever exist, you would only be 59 right now. You would still be alive. And people are, right? It's not that long ago. And now we got what white people love to do. Run in fear of things they don't understand. White flight. Despite this judicial decision in government and legislation, because many pools were unofficially segregated through violence and intimidation by white swimmers, the issue of access for the black community in many ways persisted. Desegregation often brought intense racial conflict at pools, so sometimes blacks were not admitted on the grounds that their use would cause, quote, disorder among pool goers. So rather than fix the social problem of antisocial, racist-ass white people not wanting to swim with black people, instead we're just going to not allow black people to go there because it's not worth the hassle, because these white people are going to get all uppity and start, you know, attacking people. Because clearly they just cannot contain themselves. They don't have the capacity to do it. They don't know how to not be violent assholes. They're just doing it all the time. In addition, instead of participating in integrated swimming, whites fled in mass numbers to the newly developed suburbs, home to their private home pools and extensive aquatic facilities provided by their expensive member-only country clubs. And this is not a new take, fuck the suburbs. All my homies hate the suburbs. They are literally drains economically on their local communities, and they're just not good. They're not good places to be in. They're not good a place to raise a family because there's nothing to do. Because of zoning laws, you can't have a coffee shop in the middle of your suburb because that would ruin the culture of the neighborhood or whatever. Like, motherfuckers, they literally built out the worst, economically inefficient, ugliest, nothing to do ass places called the suburbs in order to avoid having to be around black people. Come on now. What are you doing? How is this a thing that we've had to have happen in our society? Well, it's white supremacy and the systemic issues that allow for white people to be this fucking ignorant and, in fact, incentivizes them to be that ignorant and be that bigoted. But Jesus Christ, man. Fuck the suburbs. They're literally racist by design. They are literally there for white people to flee from the fact that black and brown people happen to exist, and they're no good. They're no good for anybody. They're not fun. Watch a Not Just Spikes video, and your third eye will open immediately. It's crazy, man. For example, the average number of daily white swimmers at a pool in Druid Park, Baltimore, plummeted from 775 swimmers to 1955 to just 6 swimmers in 1956 post-desegregation. White people are scared of black people for no reason. This retreat marked a new private pool building boom that took place during the 1950s and 1960s, which was almost exclusively accessible to whites. Because if you can't, by the state, force segregation between white and black people, well, then you're going to use money to do that instead, because that's part of the reason why this money exists in the first place. That might be a little crazy to think about. If we got a system that revolves around people needing to make money to live, well, there are going to be people with a lot of it and people with not a lot of it. And if a variety of policies in our political system are aimed at making sure the wealthy can keep making more money and exploit their laborers more and have worse working conditions for them and also deregulate their businesses so that their products are of questionable quality into the future and all this the people with the more money are going to have the more power because you use power to get things done in society. And if money is power, well, then the wealthy suddenly have all of it. Whoa! Turns out, if you can't use the state to legislate bigotry and oppression against a group, well, then you just use money to do it. The boom included the construction of thousands of house pools and private swim clubs in suburban America. By the way, you might notice, this affects white people too, just the ones that don't have the money to be in the suburbs, which is many people nowadays, because the middle class doesn't exist in America anymore, and motherfuckers are poor. So, in a way, this racist bullshit is affecting white people too. You know, people talk about, oh, black people can't swim because blah, 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 blah. And one of the reasons why, by the way, is because they were literally not allowed to swim in public pools. And also, it's just a stupid stereotype anyway, but that's where it comes from. Turns out white people don't know how to swim anymore either because they're not swimming anymore. The fuck? They're not allowed to swim anymore because fucking racist-ass motherfuckers don't want to have pools open anymore because black and brown people can now swim in them. It's crazy. During the mass construction of private pools, the Federal Housing Administration openly discouraged the building of public pools, which were most accessible to black and lower-class Americans, but encouraged private pools, which were solely available to wealthy whites living in the suburbs. Closure of public pools in American cities. Private club memberships and home pools were exclusively available to wealthy, mainly white Americans, and the departure of the cities left the state of public pools uncertain. Without white Americans flocking to the pools for exercise and on hot summer days, there was no longer an urgent need for public pools. Cities closed and defunded pools altogether, leaving almost no pools for the millions of black people concentrated in American cities. Huh. Would you look at that? Well, that seems bad, right? And we got Palmer v. Thompson. We got Supreme Court cases over public pools, man. The Supreme Court case, Palmer v. Thompson, addressed the issue of shutting down public pools, the only pools accessible to the poor post-desegregation. The case involved the city of Jackson, Mississippi, a southern state. Wonder why that is, huh? About all these people that valorized the Confederacy and the South will rise again, what? Huh, what's all that about? Closing 4 public pools and transferring the 5th to the YMCA, which was only available to white people. In 1971, the court ruled that the city government could choose to not operate their desegregated facilities if the decision appeared neutral at face value and they were spreading, quote, equal damage on each person in the area. However, in reality, the damage was not equal. The city closed all of the public pools that were affordable to lower-income residents, whom were largely composed of black Americans. So instead of allowing black and white people to swim in the same pool, white people who were terminally sexually insecure and afraid of black people were just like, okay, well, we're just not going to have pools anymore for the public. You know, if you don't have the money to own your own pool, get fucked. You're not allowed to swim anymore, which, you know, really fucks up the Midwest and people that aren't around big bodies of water. But that was the sacrifice they were willing to make in the name of their insecurity and hate. And that's one of the main reasons why you don't see a lot of public pools anymore. It really makes you think, you know, about dumbass news sites like this, who later on, so this was 9:15 a.m. this was posted by this account. Same day, 9 hours later, 2:45 p.m., after a deluge of most likely Twitter blue checks being incredibly racist about this, they had to write, "We are upset that kids have to go through such lengths to go for a swim." Which, of course, they would have to put this out. Because on Elon Musk's Twitter, you post anything with a black person in it, and suddenly, there's a lot of people that don't think that person should exist making comments about it. It's crazy. And they all give money to Elon Musk. and he caters to their every beck and call, and is seemingly willing to give them extra money to advertise his verified ads program, which is just a Ponzi scheme, allegedly. Anyway, so that's what made me think of this. Like I say, I'm not the first person to ever talk about this. I'm not going to be the last either, and I'm probably not the person who's done it the best. However, if you hadn't thought of it this way, once again, I heard about it from a Beau the Fifth Column video. It was some video about how to help white people understand the ramifications of racism against black and brown people in this country, and one of the major ways that he said is to talk about the lack of public pools and the fact that all of that stems from racism. Shockingly, the country built on racism still has a lot of it going on at a systemic level even. That's crazy. No way. Also, just really quickly, because we couldn't move past this. So we're talking about pools here, okay? Listen to me. I'm a frog right now, all right? But listen to me. We're talking about public pools. We're talking about people go to swim, whack each other with pool noodles, dive in the deep end, get exercise, whatever people are doing in the pool. And there is a part of this page called instances of violence. Just think about that for a second. It's absurd. Like, what instances of violence? We're playing chicken or whatever, where you're on another person's back in the pool and you try to knock another person off, like that kind of violence? No, as it would turn out, not that. The kind of violence white people love to do. On opening day of the pool park in 1931 that included 2 gender-integrated pools, a sun deck, and a sandy beach area that overall could hold 10,000 people, a lot of people, prospective black swimmers were asked to present a, quote, health certificate indicating the individual was disease-free, while white swimmers entered without problem. Interesting. When some black swimmers were finally able to get into the park area, violence ensued. A group of black swimmers who endured verbal intimidation to enter the pool were pelted by rocks, dunked, and punched by white swimmers, while police stationed on deck did nothing except charge the black swimmers with inciting a riot simply for existing, brother. Not because they actually incited the violence. That's usually the cops' job when it comes to people who are out protesting, or, right-wing groups like the Proud Boys, etc., but because the fact that black people simply existed, and white people were uncomfortable with that fact, because they're insecure and hateful as hell, a riot broke out. This is nothing new, obviously, but it's over a public pool, man. Goddamn. People are just trying to swim. In 1935, a Girl Scout troop composed of black youth organized a day to go to Highland Park Pool with the assistance of the mayor of Pittsburgh. The girls were dunked and splashed by a mob of white youth as station police officers turned a blind eye because, what about the children? What about the children? Obviously, you can't really what about the children when those children are a skin color that you do not find enjoyable or whatever. Jesus Christ. So, the whole idea optically of having a Girl Scout troop, a black youth go to a pool, is that, white people are generally speaking less likely to enact violence against children. Obviously, that does happen a lot. But it's that's the idea, is they're just children, so surely these white people will not enact violence against these black young girls. Turns out the white youth were the ones to do it instead, because it's a bit more permissible than if they're around the same age group, apparently. And the reason why these white youth are not because they're inherently hateful people or whatever, but because they've been propagandized to by their parents, by their media, by the systemic factors that keep black people and brown people down in this country, and they go on to do such ugly things as harass black girls simply for swimming in a pool. If you really cared about the well-being of children, because these white youths are clearly not doing too well, mentally speaking, if this is a thing they're allowed to do and get away with, if you're really caring about the safety and well-being of the kids in this country, eradicating racism from every single possible atom of this country would be a good way to protect the youth, not only of those who would be subject to said racism, but also the ones whose minds are ruined by the propaganda that causes them to do that violence in this instance. But, clearly, what about the children has always just been a way to be able to gain more political favor for your oppression of the outgroup. And to end on a more positive note, in the media, in May 1969, Fred Rogers, or Mr. Rogers, host of the popular children's show Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, aired a scene that was directed at the issue of black and white Americans swimming together. In the scene, Mr. Rogers invites black actor Francois Clemens, who was a recurring character, Officer Clemens, on the show, to put his feet in a small pool on a hot summer day. The two men then chat by the pool, and at the end of the scene, Mr. Rogers shares his towel with Officer Clemens. So if you've watched this video up until this point, you'll realize how at this point in time in history, 1969, only 5 years after the Civil Rights Act is signed and passed, this is a pretty big move for a respected children's show to do. To show that, oh, somebody like Mr. Rogers is willing to enjoy, a small pool to cool your feet off because they're not going to have these two in an actual pool for this children's show. And then he shares the towel. Like, oh, maybe the lies I've been told about black people being inherently dirtier are actually false because they are. And Mr. Rogers is trying to help you understand that. This would be called woke in the current United States of America by Republicans. This would be considered indoctrination of your children, actually, by conservatives of the modern day if this was to air today and we still had the bigger systemic issues at play when it comes to the desegregation and segregation of public pools. History does not repeat itself, but it does indeed rhyme. The scene was interpreted by Waters as a critique of the separation of black and white people at pools and a display of how both races can peacefully share the water together. When the scene aired in 1969, segregation was unconstitutional in the United States, yet black Americans still were not treated as equal citizens and did not share pools with fellow white Americans. Even motherfucking Mr. Rogers understands this. If Mr. Rogers is ahead of you on an issue like this, you need to do some serious introspection. Because he is supposed to be marketed as like one of the most milquetoast, sanitized people, his character, in media. Like, if this is a thing that literal white bread can figure out, like, come on now. I think we can move past this as a society. And I have hope that we will. Right? Like, I talk about all this shit, and I try to, do this kind of edutainment bullshit as a way to, like, not only give people information that they may not previously heard, or give them information in a way that I can deliver it that they may not have heard it, in that style or whatever before. And I try to make a lot of jokes about it as well. I try not to be super doom and gloom because things are, in fact, getting better. Now, of course, the Republicans, conservatives in this country are trying their best to stop progress from happening, aka stop people from being able to peacefully coexist with no problem, because that's good, actually. Because conservatives in the Republican Party, and all over the world, frankly, hate you and want you to suffer, they are, standing in opposition to this every step of the way. One of the big ways they've been doing it recently is this anti-CRT shit. We're like, oh, well, if you teach kids about the history of racism in this country and the fact that this country was actually founded on the violence and genocide of the people native to the Americas that were here, and also the violence against black people in terms of literally stripping them of their personhood and forcing them to do labor for free to build this country, if you teach kids that, well, it'll make them feel bad about themselves as they're white, and you're teaching kids that white people are inherently... That's not what's happening. They're not being taught that white people are inherently bad. They're being taught that white people were doing bad things back then and that they shouldn't keep doing them now. That's it. They're teaching an actual history of this country and not a sanitized version of it. And the reason being is so these problems don't continue to happen, right? But Republicans don't like that. Conservatives don't like that because they want black people to remain oppressed in this country. They want brown people to remain oppressed in this country. They want everybody who isn't a cisgender, heterosexual, white Christian man of means, of capital, to be the protected in-group, and they want to bind the out-group, right? Because of that, they are so against the idea that, white children might learn about the sins of the past that white people did and how they were bad. And those children will go on to not repeat those evil things, and we will be better off as a species for it. Right? That's what the Republicans really don't like, that idea. Because obviously they want to continue a variety of those things. They actually celebrate a lot of these things by flying the flag of the traitorous country that literally spilled the blood of their own countrymen in order to keep slavery intact. It was in their literal secession document. Okay? Some bullshit. Anyway, I don't know how this video is going to be edited together. Ideally, if you're into what I'm talking about, you'll be watching it, but we got to keep people's attention somehow. We'll see if Hypergressive does some cool video essay type content. Also, let me know if you like the not live streamed content as well. I kind of found it to be interesting. If you didn't know, I started my channel doing this kind of thing. I would write, well, this was all off the cuff, even though I was reading from this article. All my commentary after that is off the cuff. But I used to write scripts before I was good at public speaking type shit. Obviously, streaming has gotten me better at that, where I don't script anything anymore, of anything you see on my channel. But I used to. That's what it started as, what I called the Conure Report. It was very political, it was very soy, and it was very cringe. And also, I looked like a lesbian back then, okay? Don't look at it. It's a mistake. Don't do it. It's not real. No, to be fair, I kind of look like a lesbian now too, just a different kind. And obviously, I essentially did live readings of those scripts, like filmed before a live studio audience, while, my live stream chat is there. And I would do several takes and whatever, and would edit it together afterward, kind of like a live taping of a video essay, because I used to be a video essayist, actually. I used to do scripts and all this kind of stuff. But nowadays, all of my shit comes from my live stream because it's just easy to do it that way. However, doing this right now, as I have been, was actually kind of enjoyable, and it takes a lot of pressure off of me in order to like talk to chat, engage with chat, and whatnot, which I do enjoy doing, and also provides a lot of benefit to the content as well. But it allowed me to be a little bit more focused and pointed here, which is also cool, and it's just a different thing. So if you enjoy it, maybe we'll do more of it. If you hate it, we'll probably still do more of it, because fuck you, you bitch, you suck my frog dick. Anyway, and if you hadn't heard any of this information, I hope you enjoyed my retelling of it. I hope you're able to use this information into the future and figure out ways to be better people, rather than the motherfuckers who are literally so insecure about their own sexuality that they wanted to stop a certain group of people from swimming in pools with the women of their group. That's crazy. Have a good day.